Who is this man? It's a question we've been thinking about the last few weeks, isn't it? Who is this man? It's the question the disciples asked when Jesus calmed the storm. Who is this man that the wind and the waves obey him? Several people in Mark have given answers. He's Beelzebub, a demon. He's John the Baptist reincarnated. He's a teacher. He's the Son of God. It's not that different to today, is it? Who is Jesus? Well, he was a good man, good teacher, wise, a political activist, Jewish carpenter, a rebel, a prophet. He wasn't even real. He was God. It's quite a varied view, isn't it? I wonder who your friends would say Jesus is. I wonder who you would say Jesus is. Now that's a question that Jesus puts to his disciples in Mark chapter 8. Who do you say I am? As he starts to explain who he is and what he's come to do. But before we get there, let's have a look at what happens immediately beforehand. Jesus and his disciples go to a village called Bethsaida, where a crowd bring out a blind man and they beg Jesus to touch him. Now, we know that Jesus can heal with a touch. In fact, Jesus can heal with a word, but that's not what happens here. Jesus takes the man, leads him out of Bethsaida, and then spits in his face. Now that might sound shocking to you, and I don't have an answer for why Jesus spits in the guy's face. Maybe we can talk about it next time we're all together. But what happens afterwards continues to be surprising. Jesus says to the man, "What can you see?" Now, to me, that's a stupid question for one of two reasons. One, Jesus, the man is blind. He can't see anything. Or two, Jesus, you just healed him. He can see everything. You should know. But yet Jesus asks him, and the man's response continues to be surprising. The man says, "Well, I can see people. They look like trees walking about." Can't see very clearly. He can see kind of shapes and he knows that they're people, but he can't see what they actually look like. What's happened here? Has Jesus' powers run out? Can he not fulfill a healing? Can't he do it? It's a bit like, do you know that scene in Hercules where Hercules gives up his powers to Hades for a day and then Hades drops the weights on him because he no longer has any strength. He can't even pick up those weights. Is that what's happening here with Jesus? Has he just lost his power? Well, it doesn't sound like it, because then immediately we read on and Jesus puts his hands over the man's eyes and his sight was restored. He's completely healed. So why a two-stage healing process? Why did the man get partial sight and then able to see everything? What on earth is happening in the story? Because that's where it finishes. We don't get told any more than that. But there is an answer, and that answer is what comes next with the disciples. Jesus goes to the disciples and he says, "Who do people say I am?" Well, some say Elijah, some say John the prophet, John the Baptist rather, some say a prophet. Jesus says, "Who do you say I am?" Well, Peter says, "You are the Messiah." Now you or I might go, "Well done, Peter, you figured it out, good work. Props to you." But that's not what Jesus does. This is a changing moment for Jesus' teaching. Before this, he's been doing miracles and teaching. After this, he's on his way to the cross. This is the middle point, and we get this sentence: he began to teach them. This is the point where everything changes. They see that he's the Messiah, and then he goes on to teach them what the Messiah must do. The Son of Man must suffer, must die, must be killed, and then he will rise again. It's pretty shocking if you hear that. Picture it. The Messiah is the person who's going to save the Jewish people from oppression. Now, you're under oppression by the Roman army. What kind of saviour do you want? I'll give you two options. One, you get a soldier. He's riding on horseback. He's got a sword. He's got a bow and arrow. He's got a shield. He's got an army behind him and he's going to liberate your people. Or two, you get a carpenter who gets tried, found guilty, and put to death in a criminal court. He gets a criminal's death. Which of those two do you think would save your people? Put it into today's context. If I told you that I had a friend who could save us from the virus, what sort of person would you expect to see? Would you expect a doctor with a vaccine and medical degrees? Or would you expect someone lying on a ventilator in a hospital bed, ready to die? That's the sort of thing the disciples are dealing with. They're being told that their Saviour is going to get put to death. Now, you may be thinking, Peter saw who the Messiah was. He said, "You're the Messiah." How does he not get it? But this is where we tie back in to the story of the blind man. You see, the blind man had partial sight after that first round of healing. He could kind of see what was going on, but it was all a bit hazy. Then Jesus restored his sight so he could see the full glory of the world. Here, we're getting the disciples have partial spiritual sight. Jesus has talked about it before, spiritual blindness. They don't get it. They know that the Messiah is coming to save their people, but they're not seeing that he's going to do it by dying. Peter says, "No, Jesus, I won't let you die. Get behind me, Satan," says Jesus. It's the harshest telling off anyone gets in the Bible. Why so harsh? Because Peter doesn't get it. Jesus is then going to go on to tell the disciples all of the ways that they can live like him. They have to take up their cross. Anyone who wants to live for him might lose their life. It's a complete dramatic change around for what they're thinking the Messiah is coming to bring. But it's what we get offered today. Do we want to follow a king that died on a cross? Or do we want to follow someone who's glitzy and glamoury and looks very appealing? Well, we can see the appeal of Jesus when we fully see who he is. Like the blind man had full sight at the end of that story, we can have full sight of who Jesus is today. On Easter Day, when we see what he did, he rose from the dead, conquered sin and death, and offers the same for all those who follow him. Everlasting life, no more sin, no more death. That's the promise for us. That is the full glory of Jesus Christ that the disciples couldn't see yet. Then we're in a very good position that we can see that now. And that's the choice we have. Do we want to follow that king and take up our cross? Or do we want to follow the popular glitzy glamour ones that say, "Hey, just be comfortable, be happy, but offer nothing"? That's the question that we're going to think about this week.